This fic was requested by Vicken661. Witch Confession. Warning, this fic contains strong BDSM, tickling, female on female, and it's an anthrofic. Viewers' discretion advised. A finger of water exploded over Zecora's muzzle. She furrowed it, clutching her coat tighter. It was still so cold here, and miserable on occasion. You could be forgiven for thinking it was night, with the thickness of the cloud cover. 3 more droplets soaked the hood, followed swiftly by countless more. She sighed and quickened her step. If she wasn't burdened with this bag of glass bottles, she would run. She would be soaked by the time she got home at this rate. "Zecora!" someone screamed, at a pitch that could break glass. The zebra looked around for the source. Warm light spilled out of the doorway. "Zecora, get inside!" She squinted to try and make out the silhouette bouncing in the doorway. "Pinkie Pie? Is that you? I cannot quite see it, Before she could finish her rhyme, Pinkie had snatched her from the street. She clutched her bag close as she stumbled forward, dragged by the coat, out of the intensifying downpour and through the back entrance of Sugar Cube Corner. She found herself spinning just half a turn, and then her dragging feet stopped, tilting her back. There was nothing for it. She was going down. She opened her eyes again to find herself seated, bag still held protectively to her chest. This couch was soft, and even surrounded by cushions that she sank low into. She breathed a sigh of relief, and began to relax. "Pinkie, I appreciate your shelter, but next time, not so helter-skelter?" Pinkie was positively darting around the room. "But if I didn't get you out of the rain, then you'd get wet. And if you got wet, then your bag would get wet. And if your bag got wet, then the things inside your bag would get wet. And then there might be something in your bag that would explode." She leaned over the couch to put herself face to face with her. Zecora blinked, then chuckled. "Don't be silly, bouncy mare. Nothing in this bag will cause a scare. Herbs and spices, extracts too, all are simply for a brew." Pinkie kept face contact for a few seconds too long. "Okay." Then she vanished from view. Zecora could already tell that this visit may be a little draining. No sooner had she closed her eyes and taken a breath, had Pinkie appeared by her from another angle. "Tea? Hot cocoa? Both at the same time? Actually, I don't know how well that would go, but you can try it." Zecora broke down sniggering. Tea would certainly go down a treat, black and mild and a little. The tea was already in front of her. Sweet. "I know how everyone likes their everything, silly. Now, you take it easy. I've got a party to prepare." Zecora hunched over and gasped as Pinkie vaulted the sofa. The tea, miraculously, remained unspilled. After a few sips of the tea and setting her coat aside, she could have forgotten about the rain. It was nice, actually, when she wasn't in it. The beat of it on the roof above and the ground outside, and spattering the window. She could fall asleep to it. "Ping! She yawned. "Pinkie, you awfully mind if I stay to nap a little? Wow." Pinkie chuckled to herself from just outside the door, pulling down a key from a hook on the wall. "A party? Just for you, witch." A restful nap, certainly, though it felt like there was something just a little off about it. A taste in her mouth she couldn't clear, no matter how much she tried to poke her tongue out, an itch that couldn't be scratched. Zecora grumbled. The more consciousness she regained, the more uncomfortable she noticed she was. The sides of her mouth chafed, her arms felt numb, as if she had been sitting on them. It felt like the breeze was running right through her clothes, as if they weren't even there. "Rise and shine, sleepyhead," came the call from the darkness. It was Pinkie's high-pitched voice, but the tone was less excited, darker. Zecora flinched and tried to sit up, but failed. Something was very wrong. Her clothes were completely gone. The taste in her mouth was rubber, from a ball gag wedging her mouth open until her jaw ached. Her arms were fastened behind her back by ropes, with her weight on top of them, keeping them firmly out of use. She was swung back on a chair, with her feet held up and exposed in stocks. That she could barely see over. This basement was dark, with the only light being on her. Pinkie appeared from behind the stalks, her face shadowed by her forelocks, so that Zecora could only see one of those half-lit eyes. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, and I'm gonna come and make sure it doesn't happen again. The wicked grin made Zecora's breath race. She tried to say something in protest, but all she managed was a muffled groan. Don't give me that I don't know what you're talking about baloney. I know what you are. Zecora's alarmed, wide eyes met a furrowed brow. You're a witch. She sighed and rolled her eyes. And I'm gonna make you admit it. The stocks and chairs swayed as Pinkie pushed away from them. Zecora renewed her efforts to struggle away. Maybe some slack in the rope she could use? This gag had a little give to it, so even if it did press uncomfortably, she could bite down on it quite a bit. It would be better than nothing. She didn't have much time to start plotting a grand escape, because Pinkie was back at the stocks, leaning over them with a smirk. She didn't like the look of it at all. From her sleeve, Pinkie produced a white feather. She held it between her fingers, keeping eye contact as she twirled it, then took a step back to run it down the exposed foot, barely touching it. Zecora lurched. It was just a single brush, and she had already given herself away. Pinkie's tongue peeked out, and she ran the feather back up, beginning to trace circles. The stalks were tight, enough to keep her from pulling her feet away in any meaningful direction. And all that clenching her toes and turning her feet accomplished was giving Pinkie a more varied course to trace the feather through. No finger traced her, just the bristles of the feather tracing down the middle from the ball to sole, and back up again, and dancing from arch to arch. Shrieks and whoops of involuntary laughter were reduced to snorts and grunts through the gag. The most agency she had was to chew on the tiny amount of squish in the gag for dear life. Do you admit it? Are you a witch? Pinkie snapped. She licked her lips in concentration. A second feather came from somewhere, so she could work both feet at the same time. Zecora threw her head back and shook. It was getting hard to breathe as her body tried to erupt in laughter, to no avail. This was absurd. Everything about this situation was just ridiculous. Of course I'm not taking off that gag. You'll curse me. I'm not gonna fall for that. Zecora tried to sigh, but the shuddering of her body wouldn't let her. The ardent requests were becoming fuzzy, and the pile of pink fluff at her feet was starting to blur. She was lightheaded, and she couldn't hold her head up anymore. The asphyxia put the brakes on her laughter, ensuring that she wouldn't pass out. But it made any kind of meaningful response impossible. It could have been forever like this, and she wouldn't have noticed. It took 30 seconds at least for her brain to register that the tickling had stopped. Her feet kept clenching, and her chest kept heaving and shuddering long after the feathers had been put away. Pinkie leaned on her elbows on the stock, grinning. Had enough yet? The mumbled response lacked intelligible words, but carried a distinctly frustrated tone. Pinkie just leaned in more. That sounds like witch talk to me! For a fleeting moment, as she stepped around the stock, there was the faintest hope that she might be letting her out. But no, those hands weren't coming to unstrap the gag or pull at the hideous excess of rope tying her to this chair. They were reaching to cup her exposed breasts. As Pinkie swung a leg over her and sat on her lap. After the madness of the tickling, it was almost calming. If she were able to forget the insanity of the situation, which she wasn't. Then, squeeze. No gentle squeeze was this. There was a push as well as a firm grab, with clear intent to crush. The fat compressed painfully with nowhere to go, forcing her to wince and grunt. Pinkie let go. "Don't test me, witch. I can keep this up all day." "All you have to do is make it stop." Another firm squeeze made her whimper and throw her head back. "Is admitted." How in the hell was she supposed to do that? Was Pinkie so confident she was a witch that this whole deal was banking on her being able to do something she couldn't? She kept chewing at the gag to try and find some give. Pinkie leaned back and gave the pair of breasts a firm slap. The noise from Zecora's throat was less of a grunt and more of a squeal. The right one carried the force into the left, and then they swung back and jiggled to a stop. When they had settled, another slap mirrored the motion, followed by two more, one left, one right. "Do you give up yet, witch?" Zecora's angry grunt had been tempered to low groans as her breast hummed with the visceral pain. "Looks like I'm gonna have to step it up. This isn't going anywhere." Pinkie gave the zebra's nipples a firm pinch, eliciting a muffled squeal, and got up. "Just need the right tool for the right job." Zecora winced. She could feel the deep bruising, the leftover discomfort erasing all of the residual good feeling from the tickling. Her cheek still ached from trying to laugh, and her chewing only made the chafing worse. She tried to heave her whole body to see if the chair could move with her on it. If she could budge around a little bit, then maybe, she could knock over the stocks. Though, the stocks could have a heavy base on them. And even then, if the stocks didn't break open when they went down, she could easily twist an ankle or break her legs from it. Pinkie tapped something on the stock to get her attention. "Alright, witch. No more Mistress Nightmare. I'm gonna get a confession out of you, one way or another." The pile of pink fluff was still hidden behind the stock. What was that she was holding then? The sting of pain on the sole of her left foot answered her. A fairly small area felt like it was on fire. The crop whistled again, and she had a matching patch of pain on her right sole. She pulled no punches. The balls of her feet received 3 firm strikes each. Zecora squealed and flinched every time, and tears began to bead in her eyes. "All you have to do to make it stop is own up to it. That's all." When no immediate response was received, Zecora received 2 vertical strikes on the soles of her feet. Pinkie ran through this rotation of whipping again, adding something to it each time. First, a strike across the sides of the feet, and then, when Zecora crunched her feet in and lowered them to try and shield them, one on the knuckles of the top of her feet, and one on the pinky toe that made her throw her head back and scream. Pinkie leaned over the stalks again, crop dangling in her fingers. "Changed your mind yet?" Zecora tried to grunt something tantamount to a "why" as her first tear rolled freely down her cheek. "Well, don't blame me. You had your chance to stop." The stalks clicked and parted. Zecora didn't even know they could do that. It was too dark to see it clearly enough. Her feet remained bound, but her legs pulled apart. The stalks must have been on wheels. Were her legs parted almost to splits, Pinkie reapplied the brakes, giving her full access to Zecora's front. She spun the crop in her fingers, thinking. She stopped and bounced, suddenly grinning, then ran off. What now? Zecora didn't have time to ponder. Pinkie was back nearly immediately with a flogger, the loose bundle of fibers almost like a tail on a stick. All Zecora got was a smirk before the flogger was brought across her breasts at speed. This was a very different sting. It lashed everywhere at once, leaving fibrous red marks across the breast it struck. "Confess!" Pinkie yelled, bringing it back across the other one. Zecora whined and threw her head back. "Admit! Repent! Submit! Witch!" Every word was punctuated with a million tiny whips raking across her already hurting bosom, such that they throbbed with pain in their entirety. She started holding her breath to take it. Pinkie noticed this. That wouldn't do. This wouldn't do at all. She threw the flogger over her shoulder and picked up the crop again. With a dramatic overarm motion, she brought it down on Zecora's mons, such that the leather loop struck her clitoris and dragged down over her labia. The spike of pain made her whole body seize up, and the edges of her vision blurred. That held breath released itself as a throaty scream. Tears flowed free. Pinkie waited. To get a proper admission of guilt, the perp needed to be lucid for every last whip. As soon as her breathing had stopped shuddering, she brought the crop down again. Not so hard. The intent was not injury, but still enough to send a terrible stinging shooting through her body, making the chair hop and the stock sway with her flinch. 3, 4, 5. The weight made it all the worse, since she couldn't habituate. At least her feet felt numb after a while, and the endorphin rush made the burn in her breast feel oddly pleasant after a while. This particular whipping spot was plain unbearable. It had to stop. She screamed her guilt, but all that came out were muffled mumbles, lost in the shrieks of agony. Finally, the crop got thrown away at the top of the swing. Zecora panted, looking at Pinkie through the blur of tears. Do you give up? Pinkie was almost giggling. Zecora grunted her assent, her voice ragged, 3 times. No? Well, if you say so. Zecora whined and tried to struggle away. Pinkie pulled the stalks back together and pulled a rope from somewhere. She tied her legs firmly at the knees, with truly an excess of rope. The stalks were at last released, only for her feet to be tied at the ankles. Pinkie left her feet resting on the open stalks and walked away. Zecora sighed. What improvement had occurred? She had worn a notch in the stretch. If she could just keep grinding that with her teeth, she might be able to wear it through and talk. Though, whether Pinkie would listen was quite another matter. She heard her returning before she could see her, humming a merry tune, carrying something. A metallic skid came from under the stalks, and the stalks were pulled away. She held up her feet so they didn't touch the ground. She could smell burning, and the radiant heat reached her calves. Her heart raced with fear, and she chewed at the gag even more, fighting to ignore the pain in her teeth from compressing the ball. Come on, witch! Sooner or later, you gotta fess up. Pinkie pulled away a sheet, and the heat and smoky smell only got greater. In the darkness, she could see a faint red glow under her leg. Pinkie let her legs go. The chair swung forward, so all 4 legs were on the ground. It was just a matter of time before the fatigue caused her leg to drop. Pinkie could push them down no problem, but dangling this bit of relief in front of her was so much more interesting. She retrieved one of the feathers from earlier. Zecora's breath grew quicker. Her knees were already weak. A new plan formed. She started throwing her body back in the chair to swing it back. It will fall over. She'll hit her head on something, and she'll be out cold. Pinkie quickly caught on. The feather made contact, and her knees caved. The twitch in response made her stop swinging back, and her feet fell. Pinkie guided them to the floor and onto the hot coals below. The rush of blood from not being held up, the raw flesh from the whipping, made the heat and texture excruciating. Her breath shuddered and her teeth gritted together. Pinkie reclaimed the place on her lap and kept her feet pressed to the coals. The straps wore thin, a seam popped, and there were few enough threads that, when she put her tongue behind the ball and pushed, they snapped, and the gag fell away. Fine, you win. I admit, I'm a witch. Just get off of me at once. You're... She didn't finish that rhyme, on second thought. Well, why didn't you say so? Pinkie immediately jumped up and pulled the coals away. Zecora let her whole body relax, as much as her aching flesh would let her. After a few moments panting and trying to put her feet on the coolest spot on the floor, there wasn't one, since she couldn't reach any spot where the coal hadn't been. She lifted her head to ask something, but Pinkie had already resumed talking. finally, after I found this book about witches, I learned that I've never thrown a party for a real witch before. Like, you get ponies dressing as witches on Nightmare Night, but that's not the same. So I read up everything about how the book said to find witches, and then I just need to find someone who I thought might be a witch, and then I was like, duh! And that's when I grabbed you. This is gonna be so much fun! Pinkie bounced away. Zecora inhaled, but just let it go with a sigh, and shrugged. She didn't have the energy to protest. Thank you so much for listening. This fic reading has certainly been, slightly out there, you know? Normally I don't read stories like this, but it's a request and it's... I don't know, man, I don't judge fetishes, but, this one certainly did make me feel a bit uncomfortable. Not bashing on the fetish. I mean, yeah, whatever gets your rocks off, go ahead. But this one just I don't know. It didn't sit quite right with me. So I talked to Vicken, and he or she said that. Because I was always wondering why tickling is a fetish, and apparently it's under BDSM, as in there's a sexual rush in seeing someone unable to stop you from tickling, which that makes sense, all right. So I suppose if anyone's wondering why that's a fetish, there you go. It's part of BDSM. But other than that, I don't know about this fic. This fic, it was kind of a challenge to read. The wording and just a lot of the wording and the phrasing was just a pain in the ass to read. But you know, I tried. My Zecora Pinkie, absolutely shit. I didn't try, I suppose, but still, absolutely shit. Yeah. I don't know. This fic is for some people, and I guess this reading is also aimed at those certain people, and to those certain people. I hope you enjoyed. Yeah. Until next time. Bye-bye.